Hello，你好，Welcome back，欢迎回来 to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger. Today the date is November 16, 2022. And before we start, I do have some good news I want to share with everybody. A lot of you might not know, but I have been working for the past almost a year now, preparing to launch the Johnny Tiger art uh, gallery, I guess you can say, on the Johnny Tiger website. I feel I might have mentioned this in the past, but I am not sure. Um, More detail will be forthcoming in the future, but suffice to say that there will be some new Johnny Tiger artwork that will be available for purchase. So related to that, I have also been trying to sign up for art galleries and art shows and so on and so on. And just this morning, I heard um, from the Grunt Art Gallery here in Vancouver, British Columbia, that I have been selected for an art residency program. Basically, this will be a project that spanned about 6 weeks producing tactile artwork, trying to promote and explore the idea of non-visual arts. Now, because this is going to be essentially my first foray into what you would say more professional art society, so I really have no way to even compare this to anything else in the past. I have no point of reference, but I have been told by people that getting selected for a residency in the art world is a big deal. It's something to be really proud about and sounds something to be celebrated. So I'm feeling pretty good about it today. Been a lot of hard work with me, my good friend Darren, my good friend Ian. You guys, I mean, I can't even sugarcoat this. Uh, wouldn't be able to get this done without you guys. So, yeah, thanks a lot. Hopefully, we will uh, get a lot of things done, sell a lot of artwork, go to a lot of fun places, and so on and so on. Anyway, we can all hope for that. Now, let's get back to Wisdom Wednesday. Now, as you guys can hear, I'm sure you can hear, I don't even want to hear what I sound like. I am really in the grip of this head cold I have right now. So I think I'm probably going to sound all plugged up and nasal and stuff like that. So I'm going to keep this relatively short today. Today, I'm going to tell you two short stories of what may be the beginning, that at least they are the oldest uh, fact, historical record of Chinese people actively engaging in loansharking and child labor exploitation. Yeah, I know. And we think those things are new, but now Chinese people apparently were engaged in these activities thousands of years ago. Nothing to be proud of, but this is definitely something, what you would call a dark stain on the Chinese culture. But it would be sort of one-dimensional if we spend uh, Wisdom Wednesdays talking about just the good stuff. Chinese people invented this, Chinese people did this, Chinese people did accomplish this. No, if we got to talk about the good stuff, we got to also talk about the bad stuff. And there's actually a lot of it. So, when did Chinese people first start the practice of loan sharking? Well, the official record, the oldest historical record we can find today, trace all the way back to about 1100 BC, during the uh, period of warring states. Okay, now if you are not up to date on your Chinese history, this was before the Qing dynasty, before the Great Wall, before King Shi Huan, the emperor who excavated the great rivers, before uh, all that stuff. This was a time when China was more like what you see as Europe today. So rather than one giant country, China was split up into many small warring kingdoms and states, and they were always trying to uh, conquer each other. There's a lot of war, and some of these states were really small, as we will soon see. Um, but you know, every one of them had a king or queen that wanted to be the great emperor, that wanted to rule all the rest, and so it was a period of great suffering and chaos. During the Warring States period, there was one of these little states by the name of Zhou. Now, the king of Zhou, technically speaking, he's more like what you would call a city mayor in today's scope. But back then, because any little village, any city could declare to be a state or a kingdom. So the king of Zhou, even though his kingdom was so small, he's still a king, and he decided that he had the know it all. He had the martial prowess to attack the kingdom of Qin. Why does that sound so familiar? The kingdom of Qin was the one that ended up uniting the entire China under the Emperor King Shi Huan. Uh, so anyway, long story short, the king of Zhou decided, okay, I'm going to attack the kingdom of Qin, and I'm going to, after that, unite the entire China because I am super badass. So he assembled a gigantic army of 5,000 people. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know right there and then what's going to probably happen. Now, here is this tiny little kingdom with a crazy delusional king that think with his 5,000 warriors he can unite the entire China. But anyway, because he was a king, no one wanted to argue with him. But he soon ran into a problem because his kingdom was so small and he was so poor, he couldn't really feed and outfit even these 5,000 warriors that he managed to call to his banner. So what did he do? Well, the king of Zhou decided to go borrow some money from someone who had a lot of money. And who had a lot of money back then? The Buddhist monks. The monks, being neutral for the most part, so not really dabbling in politics, they got a lot of money from uh, people who came to the chapels to donate and hoping to find some good karma, and people who come and donate to get some of their wishes granted, and so on and so on. So the monasteries throughout Chinese history were very rich. The monks were very rich throughout Chinese history. This is not to say that every monk was rich. There were definitely a lot of poor monks. But generally speaking, especially if you're the head of the order, if you're the head abbot of the monastery, you were loaded, like loaded. So the king of Zhou went to the temple and uh, decided to take out a loan from the monastery, and he even gave them a receipt and said, uh, "Once I finish the war, I'm going to pay you guys back 10 times of what I borrowed from you today." And this, my friend, became the oldest known record of a loan sharking receipt. Right? It was from the king of Zhou. Now armed with a 5,000 people army and very well equipped because he borrowed a lot of money from monastery, he went forth and did battle and got his arse really, really handily handed to him by the army, the massive army of King. And so after that, he managed to survive and came home and said, "Okay, this was obviously a really bad idea. I don't know what I was thinking, but okay." The problem is not over. His troubles were not over because now the monks came to the palace demanding 10 times of the money that he borrowed from them. They had a receipt in their hand that stood outside the palace, yelling and chanting for the king to come out and pay his debt every day. The king was so depressed that he almost committed suicide. Uh, the story goes that he went to one of the higher buildings, higher towers in his palace, and locked himself in a room and refused to come out until the monks finally went away months later. So this is a historical account of the first recorded instance of loan sharking in Chinese history. It was the monks being the loan shark and the king who got pressured so much that he had to hide out in his tower and it's because he didn't have the money to pay the monks back. Now that we know about the first instances of loan sharking, now let's talk about child labor exploitation. One of the oldest records that show us sort of an example of someone who actively went out of his way to exploit the innocence of children was a name by the name of Toei in the Tang Dynasty. We are talking about 1100, 1150, uh, around that time. So almost 1,000 years ago. Um, this guy Toei was a very smart and probably one of the earliest example of a land developer. Yeah, I know. I know how we most of us feel about land developers. Sleazy, slimy. Anyway, personal opinions aside, um, Toei was one of the earliest example of a developer in Chinese history. He was very smart, and it was said that he saw this prime estate, that the prime piece of land that he knew was going to make him a lot of money, and he bought it at a super low price. Now this area was almost near the center of town, um, but why? How did Toei get such a low price? Because no one wanted that area. This area, due to some earthquake or some natural disaster that we no longer know what happened, was a large piece of land that have sunken down, and a lot of water and sewage water from the city, and people started throwing trash there, and it became a big swamp, almost near the center of the city. So this big, swampy, watery, slimy, stinky uh, piece of land, even though it was at a great location near the center of town, no one wanted it. because you can't do anything with it. So Toei was able to acquire this piece of land with only oh, a few, like every acreage, he only had to pay a few copper, which means, like, if we converted that to today, imagine if you can buy a giant piece of land and only at like 25 cents an acre. Yeah, that's like a great deal, right? Everyone laughed at Toei. Everyone laughed at him. Like, Toei must have gone mad. What is he going to do with that no good for nothing piece of swampy land? Can't even build on it because it's too much water and it's like a big hole in the ground full of mud and trash and all kind of unpleasantness. What are you going to do with that? Toei said, well, I am going to build storefront. People say, you're nuts. A big hole in the ground. It's like a big marshy pit. What are you going to build? How are you going to build storefront? And Toei said, I'm going to show you guys. You keep laughing. You guys won't be laughing after I'm done. So Toei got himself a canoe, paddled out to the middle of this giant marshland, swampy, soupy piece of land. He went out to the middle of it. He planted a 12-foot pole right down into the middle of the big pit, the big swampy area. He got this really tall pole and stuck it right down into the ground. On top of the pole, he secured a little flag, not a Chinese flag, but a little like a little banner, a very nice and colorful little banner. He put it on top of the pole, and then Toei set up a few tents around this area, this big swampy area. Few tents. These tents, he had some vendors came there with snacks and dim sums and dessert. So he set up some little tents selling food on the side of this stinky, watery, marshy pit. Then Toei went all over town putting out posters and say, I am setting up a new game. A new game anyone, especially children, can come and play. The game is very simple. Okay? If any child can throw a brick and hit the banner on top of that pole in the middle of the pit, that child can eat at these at the dessert tent or the snack tent or dim sum tent free of charge all day. But tomorrow, if you want more food, you got to hit that banner again with a brick. You got to bring your own brick, but you don't need to pay. You don't need to pay to try. You can try as many times as you like, throw as many bricks as you like, as long as you can hit the banner and someone can prove that they saw you do it. Then yeah, congratulations, you get free food for the rest of the day. Now, adults are not allowed to to get the free food. But adults, you guys are feel free to try to hit the banner as well. But there's no reward for adults, only children, only children. And this game suddenly became very popular. Especially, can you imagine any poverty-stricken, homeless children throughout the city would flock to this giant pit. They would find rocks and bricks and anything they could find that even remotely looked like a brick. And they would bring this brick and they would stand there and chuck brick at this big pole in the middle of the pit all day long, hoping to hit it so they can get free food. And in no time at all, with less than 2 months, the pit was filled in. Now it's even flat ground. And Toei didn't really need to spend that much money for the construction. All he had to do was shell out the money for some of the free meals. After he got he tricked these children into filling in the pit for him in this really, I imagine it was a very fun fashion, but it was a little bit like child exploitation, if you ask me. He built 20 uh, storefronts on this leveled out area. Because this area, like I said, near the center of town, Toei instantly became one of the richest person in China during that period in the Tang Dynasty. But you see, no matter if we're talking about loan sharking monks or uh, real estate land developers exploiting children, Chinese people throughout history always had a knack of making money and uh, finding weird, creative ways to generate more money. I wish I have that talent.